Hello, everyone. We're just about to start. Thank you for joining us, those of you who are just arriving. So we see a few folks here. Thank you, everyone, for attending our 2024 webinar. This webinar is organized jointly by the School of Education, the Indiana School of Education, by the IU ASEAN Global Gateway unit, and by Universitas Indonesia. I am Farida Pawan, Professor in School of Education, as well as the Academic Director for the IU ASEAN Global Gateway. Joining us today are our scholars who are invested in this work, in work-life balance in the lives of women faculty. Dr. Putu Geniki Lavinia Nate is head of the Faculty of Economics and Business at the International Office, and she is also a lecturer at Universitas Indonesia. Dr. Mary McMullen is Professor of Early Childhood Education at Indiana University, Bloomington. Dr. Julia Atiles is Professor of Early Childhood Education at Eastern Tennessee State University. They will delve into the research and practicalities of work-life balance, or at least we will all be discussing the issues together. The webinar will take the form of a 30-minute conversation between our guest speakers, and at 30 minutes, we'll proceed with questions and answers. Audience members, you are invited to post questions in the chat as well as in the Q&A. We'll keep an eye on both channels. And at the end of 30 minutes, I'll draw the questions into the conversation. Panel members, I hope from this point onwards, we can use your first names. Thus, Putu, Mary, and Julia, welcome. Putu, can you begin with providing us with a context as to why work-life balance issues amongst women faculty resonates at Universitas Indonesia? Putu? Putu, please proceed.
Good morning for everyone in Indiana. Yes. Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So good morning. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I think my internet's a bit wonky. I'm joining everyone from Bangkok. Good morning for everyone joining us all from Indiana, and good evening for everyone joining us all from Asia, Southeast Asia, so Indonesia and Bangkok. Just to give you a little context, women participation in the workforce is a real key challenge in Indonesia, but increasing access just to the workforce for women is not a one solution fix all. Considerations such as caring responsibilities, gender balances with regard to family care are often still overlooked with regards to policies in Indonesia. But without these considerations, women in Indonesia cannot, of course, achieve work-life balance. It's definitely also the case for women working in academia, managing careers, well-being, families, and caring responsibilities, whilst navigating an academic career is challenging and daunting, especially for young career researchers such as myself. So drawing on my own experience, I have a 5-year-old son who is autistic. So it's it's an adventure, basically. So I truly believe that today's webinar is a really heartwarming opportunity for me and for us all to learn from Farida, from Mary, and from Julia, professors and experts in their fields with extensive experience in navigating these balances and these challenges. We're so grateful to be here in the midst of all these strong women. So Farida, I think that's just a little sort of intro from me, and over back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have strong women here indeed, in terms of Mary and Julia and you too, Putu. But we cannot all do it alone. And so thus we have also allies present here on the webinar. Mary and Julia, if you want to kind of provide some discussion and initial context as to where you're coming from. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary McMullen, and good evening to those of you in Asia. I have been in the early childhood education academic positions for 32 years. I'm coming close to retirement. I raised 3 children with my husband, and we just celebrated our 40, you lose count, 42nd anniversary of marriage. I have had academic positions mostly on faculty as a teacher, but I am also an academic who has done administration. So I've looked at things from a couple of different points of view, from the scholarly angle and the administrative angle. But that's enough about me for now. Julia?
Yes, good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Julia Atiles. Um, I am probably around my 30th year as a faculty member in the field of early childhood education. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I was just thinking in terms of context and women. My mother was a faculty member. She was a professor of nutrition. But the street where I grew up, there were 14 houses. And of those 14 houses, only 2 of the women work outside of the home. My mother was the only one with a career. The other lady worked a more traditional secretarial role for a company. But, you know, just thinking how times have changed in terms of expectations with more women working outside of the home, and how education has opened some doors, yet some of those traditional roles are still weighing on us. So I look forward to this conversation with all of you this morning or this evening, depending on where you are.
Yes, we only have 1 hour, actually 45 minutes, a little bit around there. So we will be going back and forth in terms of, in a conversational style. So I think at this point in time, I think we begin with perhaps your questions, Putu.
Thank you so much, Marinda. So, for Mary and Julia, we would really like to learn, I guess, what work-life balance means to you both, and the strategies that you've applied within your families, and to kind of maintain your own well-being alongside your partner's well-being, and also your family. So maybe we could start there, Mary and Julia. Thank you so much.
We have prepared a presentation that I believe definitely hits on that question, Putu. So should we go ahead and do our presentations for you?
Yes.
And that will give you a lot more context about who we are and where we come from. So I'm going to share screen, and give me a minute to get that started. Is it sharing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So let me start from the beginning. And you will see that Julia's college is East Tennessee State, and I'm Indiana University. But an interesting context thing here, I believe, is that we met in grad school at Florida State University about 4 decades ago. So we've known each other and followed each other with gaps in time through our careers. So I want to start, I look at things through, I study professional well-being in the workplace, particularly among teachers, but this extends to all kinds of contexts in which the workplace is. But what I have found basically in my research is that a healthy sense of well-being, a strong sense of well-being prevents you from leaving either your position or the job, the field as a whole. And it largely does that by increasing your sense of senses that I will talk about in a minute, but your sense of satisfaction. But what is well-being? And I defined it in 2016 very broadly as a general state of being and feeling well in the workplace in terms of physical and psychological health and safety, emotional stability and soundness, and overall satisfaction in activities and relationships. Now, here I situated it in the workplace, but well-being research applies to the rest of your life as well. So as I walk through some of these ideas about professional well-being, think about it as a professional work-life well-being as well. So what I did very early on in conceptualizing my work was I used Maslow's hierarchy of needs that most of you are probably familiar with at some point in your careers, that basically builds on a base of psychological health and well-being all the way up to self-actualization. But Maslow looked at this as a cumulative model, that you had to have physiological safety and health, and then safety and security in your environment, and love and affinity, esteem, until you could reach the pinnacle of self-actualization. Well, I've turned that around to say we need all of these things in our lives. We don't just start with, most of us. Now, certainly Maslow has applications for people who are physically and psychologically at risk, but I'm talking about most of us in our daily life and work need all of these things to have this sense of wellness. So I and my colleagues have flipped it, Maslow's hierarchy, into a holistic model where we identify 9 senses of well-being that are, if not equally, mostly equally important in our environments, our relationships, the things that we do on a daily basis, that we need to feel these things to feel well. So we have later conceptualized this as the relationship aspects are these things that indicate I feel a sense of belonging, that people are friendly, I'm understood. Most of my colleagues I count among my friends. My ideas are worth sharing. I'm respected. I'm accepted for who I am, and I feel this sense of belonging. So this sense of, it's a relational element, if you will, is important in our lives. And we labeled that community belonging. And so when Julia talks later about community and your networks and those kinds of things, think about your community and how you feel about them and how they make you feel and how they can help you in your lives. So the other part, the environmental part, the more physical aspects, physical and emotional aspects of our lives are supported by our sense of safety and security. And that can even be job security as well, but it's answered by things like whether you dread or look forward to the tasks you face every day. It's what's called engagement. Do I feel like I am fully engaged in loving what I do? A sense of contentment, a sense of security that's felt through not feeling my health or safety is at risk. The contentment is more the emotional climate, makes me feel at ease. When you walk into your building or workplace every day that there's something in the air and it makes you feel tense, or I can breathe here. I'm surrounded by friends. I feel a sense of belonging, but I also feel this sense of my emotional integrity is intact. Nobody's going to be attacking me, that I'm okay. And we need to feel that sense of not just physically safe, but emotionally safe. And then our professional identity, the things that we do, the practices, the experiences that we have every day, we need to feel that those are not under attack. They are kept safe. And I am feeling good about what I do. I have a sense of efficacy. My work makes me feel I make a difference in my life. You could flip that to also say, what I do at home and in my community makes me feel I make a difference, right? I'm proud of the contributions I make. And again, another thing about engagement, it challenges me to think. I'm using my professional brain or my family brain, but it's something that keeps me active in my thinking. And I'm trusted with important tasks. Now, that can be onerous at times and it can feel like too much, but these are things that actually contribute to who you are, your sense of self, your sense of identity. Now, we're going to move on with Julia, who's going to talk more about self-care and other stressors that inhibit work-life balance.
You want to go ahead and come to the next slide?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
So Julia, as Julia sets up,
Yes.
do you have any questions? Or do you want to interject any points before we move on to Julia?
So Mary,
No,
those
go
oops,
ahead.
thank you so much, Farida, and Mary also. Thank you so much for those points on flipping Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So very sort of groundbreaking, I guess, making it
Sorry.
circular and also and highlighting that we need all of them. I guess maybe one question is, especially for me working in academia and having an administrative role also, how do we create such environments where women can feel safe? So how
Let me go back
do
to
we,
that slide, but
Okay.
so you can keep that in mind. This is a multi-pronged kind of I don't want to say attack, but a way to address this is through the allies that you have at work. Think about that sense of belonging. You know, this is one where you create networks of friends and allies who support your sense of belonging, and you try to learn to pay less attention to those who attack that, who threaten that. And you have to have a sense of, here we go with efficacy, that I am here doing something important. I make a difference. And therefore, I'm not going to listen to those who say no, who say that you are not important, that you don't make a difference, that you, it's a cognitive strategy, and it's something used by therapists all the time to help you rethink and flip the script. You've probably heard that if people are naysayers about what you are doing, you have to reframe that. You know, instead of saying, oh, it's raining so hard outside. Oh, what an awful day. It's, oh, finally the grass and the flowers are getting that much needed water. You know, just trying to flip into a spirit of optimism, a spirit of I'm important, a spirit of that's your problem, not mine. You know, when they start to demean you or make you feel like you are an outsider. And then when you feel like an outsider, find those other people who maybe are experiencing that and realize you're in it together. So where you start is with your colleagues. The next step is to get your administrators on board if you're talking about at work, and finding ways that administrative policies can promote these kinds of strengths, and the way to get to some of them, Putu, is through a business model, and you're in business, right? Economically, it is a disaster for a university to constantly have people coming and going, the turnover rates. It is much better for a business or for an institution to maintain a good, strong, healthy workforce that's happy, right? So that's sometimes how you have to meet your administrators, is by talking about the bottom line. So I don't know if that was helpful, but.
Yes, Mary, very helpful. Thank you so much. Farida, over to you.
Julia, you want to take it over?
Yes. So there are a lot of moving parts in this work-life interrelated components. We have our careers, our home and family. When we think of people, we think of personal relationships, friendships, partners, spouses, children. And then there's the self-care part, which is extremely important in order to experience this balance. We have our spiritual care, physical care, intellectual, emotional, health, wellness, exercise. And I would say that often it is that part of exercise, health, and wellness that we tend to neglect because we prioritize our time to take care of others rather than ourselves. So some of the common stressors that keep us from having this work-life balance is heavy workloads. If you are on a tenure track position, the demands of research, teaching, and administrative responsibilities, they can lead to very long hours and high stress. If you're not in a tenure track position, but you're a faculty member, you often have a much heavier teaching load, which also implies less flexibility oftentimes. So the workload is definitely something that inhibits work-life balance. The imposter syndrome, and it's that idea that a lot of women experience feeling inadequate or self-doubt about whether they deserve to be in the position they're in. And that can exacerbate the stress and affect the confidence in the roles. There's quite a bit of research out there regarding this imposter syndrome. Gender biases, navigating a male-dominated environment, can lead to challenges in recognition, promotions, and funding opportunities. Although we have come a long way, I think, regarding gender biases, we still have a long way to go. And I'll give you a simple example. When I became a faculty member, because my husband worked a lot out of town, I chose a non-tenure track position to begin with. And it had a promotion system very much like from assistant professor to associate professor to full professor. In that non-tenure track, but promotion scale, I ended up being the equivalent of the full professor. And one of my department heads, who was a woman, brought to my attention that my salary was very low. And she sent me here in the United States, salaries in public institutions are public information. So I went to the library and I looked up the salaries of other males in positions in the same non-tenure track that I was. And I learned that I, who was the senior level woman, a senior level woman in that position, had a lower salary by far than males in the entry level position. So there was still, this is in the 90s, there's still a great deal of gender bias. And with the help of my department head who advocated for me, I was able to get a 24% salary increase on one given year, which is a ridiculous amount. But I had a fantastic woman as my administrator who was willing to support me. So gender biases do still exist. There are family responsibilities, balancing that caregiving duties, whether for children or elderly family members, can add a lot of pressure. And that is a very traditional role that women have held for years, perhaps because of our nature to be more nurturing. But we still carry a heavy load with that. Lack of support networks, limited access to mentorship and support from peers can make it harder to manage stress and find guidance. And I would say not only support networks at work, but also support networks and mentorship for our role as mothers, as wives, as caregivers, as just women in general. Expectations and availability. There's that expectation to be constantly available for research meetings and student support. Can blur the lines between work and personal life. It would be very nice if time at the end of the day, 5 o'clock, when we close down the university, we would go home and not have to go back to anything related to work, but it doesn't work that way. I often have students that call me in the evenings and other things that are interfering with my time to, when my children were young, to give bath, to read stories, to check homework, and to do all those other things that we do as parents. So it's that constant demand, and you feel that feeling that you need to respond to at that time, because that will help you be successful in what you do. Career advancement pressure, there's that need to, say, publish or perish, right? And secure funding from grants, and prioritize work over personal life. It's almost an expectation in order to secure tenure, for example. And there are mental health challenges. The stress of balancing all of these factors can lead to burnout, anxiety, depression, and that, you know, when you're not feeling well, that just adds on again additional stress to the equation. But so some ideas of things of how to address all of these stressors. There's things that the institution can do, the university. And like Mary was saying, it's financially, it's a better deal for them to invest in these things and support their faculty to avoid the burnout and the turnover that is a result of it. Because every time they have to do a search, that costs money, they have to train people again, and that instability of continuous faculty turnover, it's not good for the institution. So providing flexible work arrangements is a policy that tends to be helpful. Parental leave policies. I know oftentimes in some institutions you have a maternity leave when the woman has a baby, and in the United States, since Bill Clinton's presidency, we also have access to a paternal. The fathers can take some leave when a child is born. But how the institutions respond to this is different. For example, at the university where I was working when I had my children, I did not have maternity leave as such. It was up to the unit head to decide whether she would or he would provide a paid maternity leave. I could take only what was equivalent to my sick leave. So if I wanted 6 weeks off after my child was born, I had to have accumulated 6 weeks of sick leave to be able to be off that time. Luckily, when I had my son, my unit head said, this is ridiculous. We are in the Human Environmental Sciences College. You take the 6 weeks and that doesn't come off from your leave. When I had my daughter, it just happened that she was born at the end of the semester. So this summer I was off because I was in a 9-month position where I work only fall and spring semesters. So I had my summer off anyway, but it was a very real struggle for people in other units. Or at my secretary, for example, who had a baby and she didn't have enough sick leave accumulated. So she was expected to be back at work within a week of having a baby. And that's not a supportive policy. Some institutions provide childcare options within the institution, childcare centers that prioritize the children of faculty and staff, and that's very helpful. Mentorship programs at all levels for faculty are also very helpful. Transparent promotion criteria, and I've been in several universities, and in some it's a very clear list. You need this many articles, this many presentations, this student evaluations. In other institutions, it seems more like a popularity contest to me. There are no concrete numbers, so you don't know how you're doing in terms of meeting the criteria that the department expects for promotion and tenure. So promotion criteria that it's clear can really lower the stress because you know exactly what you need to do. Workload management, mental health resources available through the institution, and regular training on diversity and inclusion for all the employees. So we have a better understanding of what the different people are experiencing, what they value, what is important to them, and we become more sensitive. So these are all things within the institutional control.
Julia, before we go on, we're hitting at the half-hour mark. I would like to, if you don't mind, Julia, to invite Putu to ask questions or to the audience members, and then we can go into the personal strategies, because I think those are incredibly, we are all invested in those strategies. And so, Putu, if you have questions at this point, or audience members, if you have questions at this point, please post them either in the chat or in the Q&A platform there. We'll take the questions at this point. So, and then Putu take a few minutes to ask questions, and then we go back to with the personal strategies.
Thank you, Farida, and thank you, Julia, for sort of putting the challenges that I experience, and I know a lot of other women in academia and also those in the audience have clearly experienced so imposter syndrome. Like, it took me a while to get over that. I'm still getting over it, but and I think this question, my next question, goes towards your personal strategies. But as an early career researcher, I find it really hard to set boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
So prioritizing work over life in general, and of course it takes a toll to family, and you feel really guilty for you know, leaving your child or but it's just really hard to set boundaries. I guess my next question is, how do you do it in practice?
All right. I'm really glad you asked that question. I do have,
Thank you.
if I can, Mary, I don't know if I can go back to that slide where I was, and then the last and following slide is exactly the strategy I use. So if you can go back one. Yeah, just go back one slide. So setting the clear boundaries, like you mentioned, is very difficult. Prioritizing tasks is really important. Learning to say no without feeling guilty is something that we have to learn to do. We have to schedule downtime and develop a support network. And I will explain in the next slide what your support network can be like. Engage in self-care is really important. And schedule your time for your self-care is as important as every other task. So I was overwhelmed by everything I had to do. So I created a list, which you're looking at. And what is on the first column, I just put some examples. Prepare children's lunch boxes. This seemed like really minimal things, but it all adds up to a lot of work. Drive the children to school, cook dinner, buy stamps and take packages to the post office, take daughter to dance after school, wash the dishes after dinner, wash the clothes, do the laundry, ironing, grocery store, you name it. There are a million of those tasks. Balance the bank account, right? Pay the bills. A million of those tasks that are expected in order for our household to run smoothly. So I made a list, thinking from the beginning of the day till the end of the day. And then I would put, you see, the Monday through Sunday, and there's an X if it's not a task that needed to be completed in a certain day. Like, for example, taking my daughter to dance was only on the days that she had dance classes, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So I did a list like that. And then this is where you draw on your support network. If your partner, your spouse is willing to help, then let him sign up for some of these tasks. My parents or none of my relatives live anywhere close to me. So I could not ask, for example, something my father did for my brother was picked up my niece from daycare at the end of the day. So they could have signed up my father to pick up the children from school in there. And that was then something I didn't have to worry about. In my case, because I lived in Georgia at the time, in the state of Georgia, I did have neighbors who were in a similar boat. They had young children as well. So we would carpool and take turns. And we had a list. And this week, this family takes all the children to school. Next week, this other family takes all the children to school. And the same with the pickup. So we just engage people. In Puerto Rico, you have a lot of extended family. Not quite as normal for a lot of the males to be as involved as, for example, my husband is in my family here. So you have either extended family, you have a spouse, you have friends and neighbors. Just be cognizant of the list of the length of the to-do list, and don't be afraid to ask for people to help you with those skills. And in turn, you can offer help. If I'm going to the post office, I'll be happy to take your package and your stamp and bring you back stamps. You know, just that communication is that's one less trip that you personally have to do if somebody else is doing it for you. And next time, perhaps when you go to the grocery store, you can pick up a bag of onions for them, you know, just little things like that. With good communication and talking, you can support each other. But we organized in a very concrete with neighbors and friends for the transportation of the children, especially for after school care activities, soccer, dance, all those things, for the taking and coming back from school activities. You know, I at times when my daughter was a baby, we had a friend that actually cooked dinner for me, and I would pick up the children from school, go by her house, pick up the dinner. I paid her, of course, but it was so nice that I could just go home. Dinner was already in the car with me. I could feed the children and move on, and that just saved a lot of time. So at different times, depending on the ages of your children, you have different needs. But as children get older, they also can take on some of the responsibilities. When my son was able to drive, he started driving his sister to some of her dance classes after school, for example. And it was a condition: I'll let you borrow my car if you know, you take your sister to dance, and little things like that. But they can also take responsibility for helping set the table. I started cooking. I mentioned my mother was a career woman. From the time I was 12, I was in charge of cooking the family dinner. So just, you know, share the responsibilities and the expectations. It is, I think, I was taught good time management skills by my mother. I had a responsibility and obligation for the family. And I think of all the children that are never asked or have no responsibilities at home. They struggle as adults to then assume the responsibilities required of adults. Mm-hmm. So from a young age, we can certainly engage family, friends, and build our support network to help us, but have a clear list of what is it that you need, so you know what is it you need to ask for help.
That's fantastic strategies. You the voice of experience there. And so Putu, you had questions also on academic strategies. You want to elaborate on that? What are the things that you're doing at UI that are academic strategies that are giving, you know, some, you know, that's helping with the work-life balance, or that's kind of in the way? We'd like to know a little bit about your context.
Thank you so much, Farida, and also Julia. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. So basically, having a support network. I guess in UI it's the same. We have really strong women in leadership at UI, and I know some have joined us today, which is a real privilege. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. So having strong women leaders in administrative positions at UI, of course, helps create a conducive environment at the university. So when Mary, you were talking about coming to your place of work and feeling welcome, that's how I feel at the faculty. So even though, of course, it's not easy, like challenging, I guess. Workload is really challenging for all of us. Maintaining a good family life balance is a clear challenge. But we're striving towards those steps. So creating an environment where women can be creative, where women can be appreciated. I guess one big step that we're moving towards is this like forming places where so for example daycare centers having them in the faculty. So UI's Faculty of Psychology has a daycare center, but we need more. So more women can share responsibilities and we can learn from women working in different fields and help each other, I guess. So in our context, we're trying our best. We still have a lot to learn, and I guess that comes to kind of my next question for Mary
Can I follow up with something that
yeah,
piggybacks on what you just said, Putu? It's an
yes.
article I read yesterday, Julia, from Derry Korolek of early childhood fame. And they speak about learned optimism. And maybe you've all heard about learned helplessness, or maybe not, but you can learn to feel helpless by all those things that are happening in your life and having this external kind of sense that everything is being controlled outside my ability to do anything about it. And that's called learned helplessness. Well, this author was talking about learned optimism. As I said, flipping the script, and you've heard the expression making lemonade from lemons, maybe. That lemons are maybe these awful things or these difficult, challenging things that happen to us. And the expression is to learn to make lemonade from that. And I don't mean it in a naive Pollyanna way, but we maintain our health by feeling that we do have a sense of control and hope. And so working together with those women and male allies, don't forget the men out there who are supportive, but to say, okay, we've got this, this, and this we've got to do. It's so much work. It's such a burden. But then trying to say, but there's hope that once we get this done, these things can happen. So I encourage us to think about notions of learning to be more hopeful and helping one another that way, and bringing in all of your allies, including those men. So,
Yes,
okay, I'm
Mary,
sorry,
thank
you
you.
were about to
No,
ask
don't
me
worry.
something.
So that was an amazing interjection. So I guess kind of my next question is to kind of like how do we kind of push these things forward? I know, of course, it's great to have our male allies, and our dean is one of those male allies. So he's very supportive of creating of sort of having a daycare center to kind of support women in work, but it's not easy, I guess, to kind of establish something new. So how do we kind of push through it, given we're at sort of the forefront of this, and we have sort of the dynamism to change and work towards that. How did it happen, I guess, where you are, and how do we push through? How do we push
Well,
through
I
this?
would advise you, Putu, is
Yeah.
what I find, and I'm sure Farida at our institution has found, that change comes very slowly.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not just IU, I guess, East Tennessee State too, everywhere. And so going back to that learned optimism and having a hopeful attitude, that's all good and well, but then how do you act on that? How do you say what you need to change or what you need going forward? And I work with schools for young children that desperately need to improve or change or do something different. And what I find when I'm working with the teachers and administrators and sometimes families at these places, that you introduce change slowly and incrementally. So what I have discovered in my research is that if I go in and say, let's agree together, boy, look at this, that these two things really are something worth working on, these two things. By the end of 9 months to a year, when we are reevaluating what's happened, 6, 10, 12 things have changed. That you pull on certain threads. You don't go to the dean and say, these are our list of things that have to happen. but you go with a humble attitude, not too humble. As women, at least in the West, I find we tend to be sometimes too humble and not being as straightforward as we need to be. So be humble, but straightforward in what your needs are. But don't try to change everything overnight and then you get that learned helplessness. You said nothing's going to change. I can't do anything, all this stuff. So it's pulling on a couple of threads that you know are connected to the bigger picture and then just keep at it without discouragement. Just say, we have a story that we read here, The Little Engine That Could. And the little train says, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And before you know it, that little train, I'm early childhood, so I go to stories. But before you know it, that little train has made it up the hill. Okay, so if I've learned anything in 32 years is you just have to keep poking the bear a little bit, but not so much that he turns on you. So that's my advice.
That's
I would
Thank you,
add,
Mary.
yeah, go ahead.
if I
Yeah,
may,
no.
sometimes, for example, if you need a childcare center that is accessible for the faculty, if you can tie it somehow to university goals. For example, if you have a psychology department, an early childhood education department, a human development department, the faculty in those departments are in need of subjects for research, right? So perhaps there can be some funding for the research, setting for research, more easily available than there will be funding just to have childcare services available to the faculty. But you can tie the two. So think about creative ways of packaging your needs in ways that meet the mission of the university and the needs of the university. If having a building that is a childcare center as such in the university is not a priority, I realize they're very expensive. A lot of times you can partner in the community and you will save these many spots for children of the faculty, and in turn, the faculty are going to be placing their student teachers here who serve as part of the teaching staff. So they are just ways of packaging these things together for the advantage of all the parties involved. So that is one thing. And like Mary said, just one thing at a time. Don't try to build a ginormous, a childcare center to have 100 children, because that will be difficult. But if you can start with placements of a few children at a time, it'll grow, and then the community will see what a contribution it is, and then it's likely to grow.
But you have a
Thank you.
child care center, am I right, Putu, at UE?
One of
Yeah.
we do have a childcare center in the Faculty of Psychology, but we really need more space, basically. But
space.
Mary, talking about poking the bear, and Julia and
Not
Julia
too
talking
hard.
about,
Not too hard.
yeah, okay, not too hard. And Julia also talking about funding, because that's like a key challenge to kind of make this happen. But slowly
One
but
thing
surely.
I'm sorry, I just, you're talking to academics, so we always have something more to add, and I'll keep it short, Farida. But I've learned when talking to communities and administrators at university, if they do not agree or think something is good to do on humanitarian reasons, or because it's just the right thing to do, then you do go back to those financial reasons and how it helps the mission of the university. And you can package it with both of those in there, but certain people, especially business leaders, I have found, really want to know the bottom line. If I spend $1 American dollar here, it's going to save me $23 in 5 years if I do it this way. So as a businesswoman, keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think, this school of economics and business there is
Yes, that's their strong suit. Yeah.
That's your strong suit. And I do want to bring the discussion again. At this point, I want to invite the audience members, including our male allies, to post questions here, because this session is for everybody. Work-life balance is for everybody. Two things I want to pull out as we are conversing here. One of the most effective things I've seen at UE is the idea of sponsorship versus mentorship. Meaning sponsorship is you sponsor the students, you push your female faculty forward. It's different from mentorship, whereby you guide in tandem, but sponsorship I thought came across quite well to me, in a sense that you're saying this female faculty is doing X, Y, and brilliant job, or that faculty is doing such a brilliant job. Women sponsoring each other, which is different from mentorship, and I want to applaud you for that. Actually, the other question I want to bring back is, we here have ideas about self-care. What do you do in UE that connects with self-care? What do you do there that we could benefit from? Male allies, keep an ear out, send us questions as we were talking.
Thank you, Farida. Self-care. Well, at UE we have a mental and well-being center. But at the Faculty of Economics, technically it's mental health and well-being. I mean, the primary aim is originally to support students, but technically we can also use the mental health center to support faculty members. I guess for self-care, on the top of my head, we do faculty outings. That's for us and faculty members per department. Well, our leadership teams often come together or ask us to come together, and we normally share food, which is helpful. So community spirit type and support as Farida, as you shared. So women helping women leaders helping young researchers such as myself. So I'm an example of that, I guess. Of course, I can't be where I am without the support of women leaders within the faculty and male allies within the faculty. So hopefully that's helpful. I mean, it's not all rosy. There's a lot of challenges. I still significantly battle imposter syndrome. But Mary, you've given us a really profound solution, but can be quite simple. So when you think of positivity. So with Farida, I'm aware that there's a question in the chat. So it's on mentorship. So to Julia and Mary. So Julia, you mentioned, if it's okay, I'll just read it out.
Yes.
Julia mentioned the importance of mentorship, and it goes towards also Farida's point on mentorship and sponsorship and support, basically. So how do you think this should be done? Should it be done by a professional coach, or should it be done by sort of more senior colleagues, or could you provide an example?
So I actually can think of both scenarios. My husband is a university administrator, and he was assigned a professional coach, which he found a very, very helpful, somebody who could discuss some of the situations he was facing and who would provide advice. This person had been a university president in the past, so he had a lot of administrative experience to share with him. And that really, my husband talks about how invaluable that was. In my personal experience, I was assigned a more senior faculty member to be my mentor. And I would say that person who has navigated the promotion and tenure process can be very, very helpful. But also just somebody to be able to say, this week I'm so overwhelmed because I have this going on, and I have this that it's due, and and sometimes these people can help and provide advice to really practically manage. I'm in the position now where I'm actually mentoring a new faculty member, and being very aware of the promotion and tenure guidelines, I am like, you don't need to do that much of this, concentrate on this other aspect. Let's talk about research that you can publish, as opposed to because we're evaluated in teaching, research, and service. You don't need to be engaged in so many different service projects. That is the least important one of the other two, research and teaching. So I'm trying to guide her in making choices. So some things that she can say no to. And then some things that, protecting some time for her research is important. So I think that's where a mentor can be somebody who has been successful in navigating the system, but also I think a friend, somebody that you can take out lunch a couple of times a month and spend some time talking and just having somebody to talk to. I think it's invaluable. So both. Like I said, my husband had a professional mentor assigned to him. In my department, we work on a more advanced colleague who serves as a mentor. And I think they both are invaluable.
I'll just add to that I echo everything that Julia said, that we're assigned a mentor, as maybe you are, but it's a bit like picking a therapist or picking a friend.
Yes.
You need to also find those people in your life that you can go to lunch with and they will be honest with you.
Yes.
But also they are somebody that you enjoy spending time with. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Mary and Julia. I also find that talking about failures somehow grounds you and sort of makes you feel more human, or I mean, if you're mentored by someone who's really up there, but
Yeah.
if he or she talks about his her or his own failures, it sort of helps you feel
Absolutely.
like
Yeah, there's we
yeah.
have a colleague, Farida and I have a colleague who studies failure and how much we learn. It's Rob Kunzman, Farida. And it's an amazing idea. And you're right, Putu, you have to allow yourself to feel vulnerable with somebody who you feel safe talking about those things, because you can process those failures and you will learn a lot more from things that you get wrong than those that you do well.
And sharing those failures with your mentee are very
Yes.
valuable. Yeah.
Thank you to you both. Farida, over to you.
Well, we're all living this life, aren't we?
Yeah.
Everything resonates. And so you were talking, one of the things that I, often talk about with my own students is that, you have novice to novice types of configuration. In a sense, that helps too. Novice and expert, that helps as well. So, it's just not the knowledgeable other. It is also a partner that you can kind of commiserate, quote unquote, with, that has value. And so I'm kind of hoping for some of our male allies to interject and to say one or two things from what they've heard. Dan, you want to jump in, or am I putting you on the spot? But while Dan's thinking, there's also Adam Maltese, who studies failures and inherently puts failures into his classroom so that we all learn something together. Dan, you want to jump in? I see your audio off.
Sure. One of the kind of recurrent themes that I think I was hearing is that there's no easy answers, that this is a process that to an extent we're maybe all learning from experience. And that also applies to male allies as well. So I was wondering if any of you had comments on that there, that throughout this webinar, simply you're faced with kind of the challenge of a topic that there are no easy answers, or as much as I think all of us would like to nail this down and fix and solve problems. I was hearing things, mentioned like change happens very slowly, both within our institutions and broader society. So any thoughts on that?
Mary?
An important thing is to keep in mind, every day is a success. You know, you make it through one day, we're good. Tomorrow will bring challenges and we're ready for them one day at a time. And the challenges and the expectations and challenges change with time. As we progress in our career, our roles change, with senior faculty being expected to take on more administrative roles. And so those are new challenges, but yet you also have then that your children have grown and their needs are different and their contributions to the family are different. So it's a continuously changing dynamic. So that what worked today might not work next week because the challenges will change, but it is that, you know, keeping it organized and an I can do attitude is extremely helpful. And also knowing and expecting that there will be some times when things are not going to go well, and that's fine. You know, that is life, and we just learn from the experience and move forward. And that's the best we can do. There's no perfect life for anybody.
That's when you need those close colleagues and allies and friends as shoulders to cry on and to commiserate and say, we're in this together and we'll move forward, but let's take some time to have a drink and cry.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
I mean,
Utu, anything you want to end, wrap up with?
well, for me, this was really helpful. I guess one thing I learned from my little boy is because he has to kind of like learn to express his emotions because he's autistic. So one of the things that we had to go through with him is that to kind of identify feelings. That was also helpful for me to kind of pinpoint why I'm stressed. So I learned that from my little boy. So and just kind of being able to pinpoint sources of stress and that it's okay to be stressed sometimes sort of opens up your mind to like, oh, actually, it's not that bad. And Julia, your outlook on every day is a success is really resonating with me and very helpful for us women navigating this like huge swamp of academia. It can be very challenging. So, but for me, I guess it's a huge, humongous thank you to you all for sharing your experience 30 plus years in academia. It's a real privilege for me and for all who's listening to listen to you and to hear your experiences. And I only wish it could be more than an hour. So maybe next we can have our tea together offline at the faculty.
Thank you so much for inviting us, and it was a joy to be here.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. You know, for everyone who's here, a personal note, all these folks here that you see are my mentors and are my allies that keep my boat afloat. And so thank you for being here. And I think we look forward to next time whereby we actually meet in person and we learn more from each other. Thank you, everyone, for your interest and for your attention, and to the speakers, thank you for your wisdom and for pushing our thinking to the next level and to the next level of awareness. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day. So well, and take care, everyone.
Bye.
I'll keep in touch. Thank you.